Hey, Bob Nolan here, again with Thought Provokers, just hoping that I behave myself enough so I don't get kicked off YouTube. Today it's back into the realm of SOS, yes, and Scripture or Speculation. The inspiration of the Scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, is the number one truth of the Christian religion. Why would you or me or anybody believe in the virgin birth, the resurrection, the Red Sea story unless you believed in the inspiration of the Scriptures? Now, the Scriptures are not magic. They didn't fall out of the sky, but regular human beings were inspired by God to write them. They were breathed upon by God. They didn't write like we write. They wrote according to the culture and communication style of their days. The Scriptures are very divine, and watch out, the Scriptures are very human, sort of like Jesus. Very divine, very human. The Scriptures are literature, writings, and when I read those writings, I'm reading someone else's mail. They weren't written to me, they weren't written to us, they were written to folks back then. Some Scriptures are easy to get because they simply state a fact, like 5,000 people being fed with a boy's lunch or an apostle raising somebody from the dead. Outrageous things, but stated with clarity for me to believe it or not, and I do believe it. Other stuff is not as easy, like, the end of the age or the stars falling from the sky, or obscure words like the millennium or the Antichrist. What did those curious things mean to people to whom those letters were written? How about things that hopelessly embarrass us, like the apostle writing about the gospel being preached to the dead? I've noticed a lot of speculating on stuff like that. I didn't say interpretations, I said speculations. Sometimes I think people are prophesying about the prophecies of Scripture instead of just reading them and reasonably interpreting them. What did it mean to those people? Jesus looked at some of the teachers and said, "You don't know the Scriptures or the power of God." Seems like understanding the Scriptures was an important thing to Jesus. Now, those guys had huge portions of the Old Testament memorized just to get their job. But Jesus says, you don't get it. Your speculations and your traditions and your opinions have invalidated God's words to the people. You see, they took their traditions and speculations and opinions into the Scriptures with them, and it caused confusion on God's words. Is it different now? We really are reading someone else's mail when we read the Scriptures. Another culture, another language, another time, another way of thinking, another way of communicating. Now, it sounds really spiritual to think that the Scriptures are God's words written directly to us, but they weren't. It doesn't make the Scriptures any less divine, just a little different than they look. Maybe a lot different. That's the truth. Realizing that I'm reading other people's mail has provoked me to see the New Testament with a better understanding. Traditions have been imported into the Scriptures because people think the Scriptures were written to us, but they weren't. They were written to people thousands of years ago. Guess what? You can start checking this out by just asking questions. Guess what? Some of the experts that are teaching just heard these things from other experts. I've done it myself, and I know others that do it. They think, so-and-so big shot preacher believed it, so it must be correct. So when you come to a curious word or verse of Scripture, ask yourself, what might this have meant back then? And ask, why have you been told what you've been told about it? Remember Thomas Edison, the light bulb guy? He said, my inventions are 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. Might take a little perspiration to figure some of this stuff, maybe even a little trial and error. You see, just because I read it doesn't mean I get it. There is a huge unadvertised revolution going on right now because a lot of veterans of the faith realize that some things taught just ain't so. Scripture or speculation. I'm Bob Nolan with Thought Provokers, and remember, many speculators are out there on TV, on the internet, and even behind some really nice pulpits. So you be careful out there.